Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to Happiness in Humans Live. If this is your first time joining, happy to have you here. We do these fortnightly, so we usually get a guest star on each time to speak about something that they're really passionate about or that they are experts in, and it's all contributing to creating a happier and healthier future of work. So we have Clive here today with us. Thank you, Clive, for joining.
Hi, guys.
And if you're not already part of the Happiness in Humans community, I have put the invite link in the chat, so feel free to join in there. And yeah, let's just get started. So Clive, it would be great if you could do just a quick introduction of yourself and what you do.
Oh, I need at least 30 minutes for this.
Basically,
yeah. My career is very much 30 years in business. You know, ended up running corporate businesses. Actually started off in HR, so that may be relevant. And for the last 15 years or so, I've been involved, let's broadly call it, in coaching, with a particular emphasis on neuroscience and more recently on the quantum stuff, which no doubt we will touch on later.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you very much. And Clive is working very closely with the Happiness Index, which is obviously the company that I work for. And he's also written a book in collaboration with us as well, which I think I have a copy of it with me. Could you just share a little bit about why you wrote the book and what it's about?
Well, it's partly because you guys asked me to. Yeah, basically, you know, I mentioned that I've been broadly working as a coach, but neuroscience was a big discovery for me around about 15, 16 years ago. And it's explained so much more to me. Like most people, I think, in typical audiences, we are more psychologically informed rather than neuroscience informed. And I think we need to change that. Yeah, it throws up some incredible insights which really challenge our assumptions about our understanding of people and especially organizations. So I've been working with business leaders and typically their top teams, you know, globally really over the last 15 years or so. And more recently, then, the reason for the title of the book, Quantum Way, is that it's the quantum principles. You know, people are scared of the term quantum physics, and I get that. I was scared when I decided to have a go at it because of all the maths, etc. But it's more the thinking that's involved in it. And the reason I use this is because whilst neuroscience explains how we operate as individuals and what's going on inside of us, quantum physics is incredibly helpful in understanding things like connection between us. Okay. Now, some people don't need to understand the quantum physics. They'll be happy to take my word for it. But I didn't think offering an opinion was enough. You know, I needed to back it up to be credible in a scientific sense. And in the book, I've tried to explain that in everyday terms as far as you can, and then run with the principles. You know, it's like, okay, let's just see where this come from. And now we'll talk about why they are relevant. And they touch on things like energy, you know, and what we're energetic beings. What does that mean? So again, I won't dive into that yet, but I'm sure it'll come back later.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. And what was the writing process like for you when you were, this is your third book, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's my third book. Yeah. So it's like, it's quite, you have to be quite disciplined and it's hard work, basically. So if you're not inspired to do it, you're never going to do it. So you've got to, I think, be aware when one, you've got enough information, and secondly, you've got enough motivation to do it. Now, obviously, we had a COVID period, so it was good use of that time. So I guess I felt I'd got to the point where there was enough to be said. And then the process of writing it down is very cathartic, you know, because in conversations, you can move on quickly when you say things, but you can't move on quickly when you've written it down. So you need to be very clear about what you're writing about. So that's a good process, I think.
Definitely. So next I'd like to just get into why we're all here. And if anybody has any questions for Clive, feel free to ask in the chat, or I think you can take
That's a deep question to start with, Rosie. Why are we all here?
We're all here because we want to learn about neuroscience and quantum theory. So,
okay.
Yes.
That's a bit easier, yeah.
So, yeah, I guess, what is it? What is neuroscience and what is quantum theory? And if anybody has questions, feel free to pop them in the chat.
Yeah, just confirm that. You know, I'm very, if people have a burning question there and then, just fire away. You know, it'd be great if this was a discussion, all right? So neuroscience, yeah. So I mean, in essence, I think the important thing is to draw the distinction between in neuroscience and psychology. You know, psychology, you know, hugely influenced me, and sociology and things like that were the things that I studied. But since the 1990s, we can look at brains in action. That's down to the imaging technology that we now have available, such as functional MRI scans and others. Up until then, we just had to build theories about what was going on when the live brain was actually working. Now, since then, there's been incredible expansion of knowledge around what is going on inside not only our brains, but in our bodies. Because one of the insights that isn't sufficiently covered, in my opinion, in psychology is just how we are a total intelligence system. The brain cannot operate even in intelligence terms without the input it gets from the body. So we start to immediately redefine, what human intelligence is. Okay, so we'll come back to some of those concepts as we go through. And then, as I said, the quantum piece is very much about, okay, for me, what you start understanding through the neuroscience is we are energetic beings first. We are composed of energy. And, whilst we sometimes think of ourselves as being psychological beings, that implies to me that somehow we're mentally in control. And we are not in any way. Okay, basically, our mental processes try to make sense of our emotions and our instincts, and they come later in the reaction process. So understanding things like that are fundamentally important, particularly to workplace engagement, because traditional organizations have done little or nothing to process and handle the understanding of human emotions. It's like, you leave those outside, leave them outside of work because we don't know how to deal with emotions. Because most organizations we've built have built on rational processes, and rationality and emotions are totally different things. So this is part of the process saying, hold on a minute, if we want to really explore the key of what drives individuals and what motivates them, we need to get into that subconscious space called emotions and instincts. We're 95% driven by our subconscious programs. So that means, we wasted all this time focusing on the 5%, the stuff that we are aware of. And again, the neuroscience explains that that comes to us very late in the human reaction process. And for instance, we've already made our minds up by that. We need to understand what's going on earlier in that process. Okay, so that was a fundamental part of me, and I guess I'm drifting more and more into the workplace engagement debate now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that leads really nicely into my next question. Actually, is why should HR care about neuroscience, and what does it have to do with people in the workplace?
Yeah, cool. So because it's almost like the last sentence, because the understanding of emotions is the key to ongoing sustainability of human performance. Let's stop fooling ourselves now that people can leave their emotions at home. They cannot. Okay. And if we are forced into that polarized behavior whereby we're not allowed to bring our emotions into work and to have them acknowledged and expressed, we're actually suppressing people. And when people are suppressed, they literally lose access to large chunks of their brain, which directly impacts their performance. So it's the same principle as if you are suddenly threatened by an experience. Let's say a car nearly knocks you over. For a second or two, you can't work out what's happened. It's like, what happened then? Your body reacts, does something, and then your mind catches up afterwards. Okay, and it's like an extended version of that. When we feel threatened or distrusted, or not acknowledged, we're in survival mode, which is a subtle form of withdrawal. So people who don't feel trusted hold themselves back. They won't give all they can give because it's too risky and they don't think it's valued. So these are the types of things for me that are absolutely vital to sort of say, come on, let's have another look now. Organizations shouldn't be about hierarchies and organizational boxes and so-called bosses who can't explain why you should do something other than the fact that they're the boss. We need to have people who can tune into each other and understand how they get the best out of each other. So massive implications, not only for the structure of organizations, but leadership in the future. Okay. And for me, the reason why this has to happen, it is not an option, is because new generations, including a lot of you guys who are listening, who are coming through and will demand this change. Because now there are choices opening up of organizations that can lead and organize in a better way. And the ones who can't will be left behind. So there is no choice, in my opinion, about this. It's just how quick you're going to get on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely have had lots of conversations with people in the HR role, and they've all said that they've seen leadership teams have a more human and empathetic approach to leadership, I guess, in general, but and that is all due to really the pandemic, but it's kind of a shame it took that to get to this point,
Yeah, and we can't trust that reaction yet. Yeah. Unfortunately, because that itself may be a calculated reaction to appear in that way in order to get a right reaction from the people in your business. So time will tell as to how really authentic that is. And obviously, I hope it's the case. And then if there are leaders that understand that, they need to be more plugged into their people, then they need to invest time in this new level of understanding what that means. Because, we're all creatures of habit. And if they fall back into the old ways, they'll be missing huge opportunities. Because you're right, the pandemic, is an amazing thing, obviously an awful experience for so many people, but at the same time offering a real catalyst for change. Because it's like, experiences just closed the gap. Something that would have taken years has just happened in a very short period of time. And now we can recreate and redesign new rules for the future. But a lot of businesses, I think, is struggling and sort of think we know we need to do something different, but we can't articulate it. And that's where this stuff comes in. Don't buy into the things that worked in the past. Work out the things that will work in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I guess that again leads nicely into my next question. Where should we start when we're trying to bring about neuroscience and implementing that into our organizations and into people's strategies? Because I know it's a lot of, it's a really new topic, I guess, to bring into the workplace, and human emotion as well. So what's a good starting point?
Well, obviously, you've got to invest the appropriate amount of time in understanding the subject. And as I said, that'll be different for different people. Some people will be motivated to dig a bit deeper into the science and want to understand that. For others, it'll be a more intuitive process, because normally when I'm explaining this stuff, the typical reaction I get from 90% of people is positive. It's very much like, so that's how it works. It's not like, well, that doesn't make sense. Some of the ideas are very new and at first need some processing time. But for a lot of people, it's an intuitive journey. And all I'm really doing is giving them the language and the background to believe in their own gut feel around these things. And that gives them confidence. They sort of think, okay, there is something in this, and now I can explain this better. That's the power of intuition, when it's combined with real rational logic. So you've got to invest some time in understanding it. And then it's about being prepared to do something about it. And what I mean there is because we learn more from experience than we do from study. Study is a hard form of learning, as we can all testify from exams and all that stuff. It's called attentional resource in the brain. And the brain isn't really designed to do that, which is why we have to work so hard at it. But when we, experience is always an energetic process. The body is always taken on board, the value association with the experiences that it has. So the brain is equipped to remember experiences. And that means we learn much more quickly. So as you know, Rosie, I've done stuff for the Happiness Index around, creating programs around this. Mm-hmm. And in the early days, of course, it feels a bit strange to people because there's new language. But the more that people get into it, the better it is, and the more they enjoy it. We've created a buzz. You can see that in the Happiness Index, around this program, because people are getting it now. So and that's what obviously it'd be great for guys in this community to be armed and confident enough to do, in their own businesses as well. Because look, there's nothing. I'll throw up all sorts of challenges around organizations. I will challenge any hierarchy and saying it's not going to work in the future, right? Now, that'll scare a lot of senior people to death. Well, how the hell am I going to manage if I haven't got a hierarchy, all right? And I know I was a CEO of a 1,500 person business, right? I understand how our hierarchy comes in. And I'm not saying that, you get rid of all of the rules. But we have to, in my opinion, when you look at the science, it just validates the fact that the worst thing you can do is put people in boxes. And we've done that for the last 100, 200 years, organizational boxes. You know, you fit into that box. You are there to support the organization. And it should be the other way around. The organization is there to support the people. Mm-hmm. And we need to build natural environments where people can be themselves, discover themselves, and do that in a collective way. Because, you know, so the quantum physics, for instance, makes it very, very clear, none of us can exist in isolation energetically, right? We've been encouraged, almost forced to think of ourselves as individuals. But actually, we're shaped by the people around us. We are the response to the people around us, and you can never take them out of the equation. So again, if we can create like initiatives and programs that allow people to learn together, that's when we get what we call a cultural accelerator. So it's basically, you know, any learning done on your own is hard work. And that's the classic problem with any training programs, right? Is they go into a classroom environment, hopefully get enthused, and then go back to work, want to do something about it, but nobody else has been on the program, right? So it's just hard work trying to work a way through that. If you create learning opportunities as part of a change program, where it's very clear what the learning is directed at, and you learn together, that you create much more momentum for change. And again, we can demonstrate that scientifically and what it means. You know, you get people opening up, believing in the same causes. They amplify each other's energy, you know, and it can be a fantastic process that you then go through. And all of that has been held back in the past by the way that we structured organizations around hierarchies. You know, we have to get away from the concept of being the boss. You know, a leader is not a boss. A leader is somebody who can inspire, understand, and connect with his or her people. Mm-hmm. It's fundamentally important to do that. And, you know, it's, that's obviously, I'm getting on my soapbox now. I can't help it. It's, to me, it's important.
Yeah, definitely. I actually had a conversation with an organization in the recycling industry last week, and mm-hmm. just kind of asking about their company culture. And they said that it's really cool because they have a really positive company culture because they don't really have that hierarchy like you were speaking about, Clive. Yeah. But they have the CEO out in his overalls working on site with the rest of the team, and they create opportunities for their different departments and team members so that they can all collaborate across those different teams, and just gives more opportunity for people to learn. And
absolutely. Authority should come from the person, not from the job role. You know, it should be born of respect. You know, our personal authority should be based on the way that we're able to present ourselves in a way that's about integrity. You know, not about you've got to do it because this is where I sit in the organization.
Definitely, yeah, definitely agree. Okay, so my next question then, this is we've been talking about this quantum stuff, and you know we're getting rid of hierarchies, and I know that your book is kind of explaining quantum organizations, and that's what we are built on at the Happiness Index. So could you explain what is a quantum organization and how that can be translated into everyday life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see, the principle, you could almost substitute the word organic organization for quantum organization. It's a bit more than that, but it's along those lines, okay? It's a totally naturally designed organization which takes into account the things that we now understand about what it means to get the best out of people, both individually and as a collective force, okay? So you will know, Rosie, from stuff we're doing in the Happiness Index, that therefore there's a lot of emphasis on teams, you know, on things like diversity, on things like trust, on having loose and what we call light touch structures that are able to change very, very quickly, and things like that in businesses. And that, of course, as I was saying earlier on, is very alien when you compare it to some traditional structures now. Although I'm glad to say this is already starting to change, so it's not completely out there, this type of thinking. But the whole point is that we have to throw away these old ideas of how we get the best out of people. You see, traditional corporate business, certainly, you know, at my time, basically you were left on your own. Okay, it was like, okay, it's very much a dog-eat-dog type of environment, even though we like to sort of put some fancy veneers over that. You learn on your own, you reflect on your own, and you make it on your own. And sometimes at the expense of your colleagues if you have to, okay? And that is so, the price of that is huge, but it's a hidden cost because there's all these people that get turned off along the way, and they get turned off not only the obvious stuff of like walking away, but the subtle stuff around, I am not going to give you what I could give you as an organization because I don't think you would value it anyway. So, yeah, I drew the analogy in a recent different podcast I was doing with some MBA people and with some solicitors. And it's like going into a horse stud. Okay, and if you go into, I can relate to this because I did some stuff in a horse stud, getting managers, designing programs to get managers to work with only their instincts and their emotions, right, and to drop the rational stuff. But basically the way that the horse stud farm works is, this is the biggest one in the UK. They've got about 400 horses there. And it's all about spotting the ones that are going to make it to the top, okay? So the ones that make it to the top, brilliant, you know, they're worth a fortune. And this isn't a commentary on horses for me, it's a parallel. But it's the same sort of thing in many organizations. It's like, okay, well, we'll throw everyone in together, let them fight it out. And the ones that rise to the top, great, you know, we'll look after them. And I'm fortunate that the casualties that which appear along the way. In the horse farm, many of those horses will drift out into other areas, and some of them will end up as meat. It's as simple as that, okay, which obviously isn't a nice picture. And we have to get away from that because the benefits of connection between us as teams, you know, mutually developing each other and our performance ability is so rich and so untapped. Just take a little scientific insight on that, okay? When we're in the zone, you know, that's a term that we can technically define, right? So people will talk about the zone normally in sporting circles, but it's not just in sport. It just means when we're fully at our best. What happens is there's a synchronization between the brain and the heart. And we can see that in terms of the brain waves and the heart rhythms and things like that. And we can measure that in terms of what is called power spectral density. And when we measure that, what we find is when we're in the zone, we process information at a speed which is around about 5 or 6 times faster than our normal operating mode. So when we're in the zone, we're basically 5 or 6 times more powerful than we are, you know, more creative, more productive than we are when we're just ticking along, right? And there's no other access to that other than being yourself and feeling totally synchronized within yourself. And that means believing in what you're doing, enjoying it, and feeling able to do it. You know, and I've worked with sporting athletes, like in the professional world, around this stuff. But they translate directly into organizations as well. You know, when that's what it takes, is to feel we're in the right place at the right time with the right talent, with people valuing us, then we give it our best. And these aren't small steps, they're huge steps that can be taken. Yeah, and part of the reason that the term quantum was attractive in this discussion was the whole quantum leap idea, I think, which a lot of people can relate to, which is, this is not about incremental improvement. This is about changing the way we do things and stepping on to another complete new level. Sorry, I'm conscious of the fact I'm going on again. You might have sensed like I'm quite passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm listening. It's it's funny because I feel like I'm just like so tuned into what you're saying, and yeah. I guess.
Well, see, part of the reason for that, right, I'll just say it's relevant. Look, I'm not a neuroscientist. That's the point, all right? Even though I've written a number of books about it. So if you like, that demonstrates this is not an inaccessible subject, okay? You know, so most neuroscientists don't have any real experience of business. You know, but I'm a hybrid in that sense. And I happen to discover this and become very passionate about it. So when I make comment, it's very much that mixture of business experience and the scientific insight, okay? But I hope with anyone that starts to think, you know, maybe there is something in this for me, I hope you can demonstrate that you don't have to be a neuroscientist or a quantum physicist to work with this stuff. We can translate it between us into stuff that's hugely relevant here and now.
And that's exactly why having these conversations is so useful.
Cool.
So I guess I didn't really have any more specific questions, but I know that some people might have questions for you, Clive. If anybody had something they wanted to ask about neuroscience or quantum organizations.
Yeah, it would be lovely to get some questions, to get some discussion. And I had a look at the expected audience in advance today, and that was interesting because looking at some of the themes that you guys are working with, there was like future workplace engagement came up a lot, attraction and retention came up a lot. And I would have thought the conversation we've had is already, it's apparent how relevant that is to those discussions. And this is a discussion forum, but actually I'm working with the Happiness Index to create programs that at the moment we're running internal programs for the Happiness Index to get the Happiness Index people up to real speed with this stuff. But we're at the stage now where we're starting to create external programs that clients can join for this type of stuff, and again, very much focused on change, not just talking about it, but, getting to understand it, doing something about it, coming back, checking in with that understanding. Is it going well? Is it not going well? And then moving forward on that sort of basis and doing it as a community. So, with that sort of backcloth, please do, fire away with any questions. And there are no daft questions, believe me. You need to start somewhere, and it'd be lovely if we had some input along those lines.
Definitely. Luke, did you have your hand up there?
Yeah, if I can, please.
Yeah, please go for it, Luke.
Struggling with a couple of points you said there.
Yeah, great.
I can understand them on their own, and I love the bit about the shared learning experience and the change program. I've seen that. I can buy into that.
Yeah.
But then how does that play out against trusting your gut instinct? Because to me, the concept of your gut instinct is your individualism. Whereas if you're going into a shared learning experience, you're going to stop and check yourself and think, what would so-and-so do in this sort of occasion?
So let me give you some measures on this, which will challenge some of that thinking, I think. So for us to have an impulse to get to a point of awareness in the brain takes 420 milliseconds. All right, that's when we become conscious of something. I don't have a precise measure on instincts, but we know they are faster than emotions. And emotions take 80 milliseconds to get into the brain, register in the brain. So that means we're already reacting at an emotional level much more quickly than we are at any sort of conscious level. So let's just take an argument and say the instincts are 70 milliseconds, whatever it is, okay? So that means we've already got instinctive responses, and that in no way necessarily correlates with our own view of our identity, okay? So because you started to touch on that. The danger with the view of our identity is that it's something that we've tried to create. So when we talk about, there is no neuroscience evidence of a constant self in the brain. Okay, there's no one area where you can say that evolves through life and that's always where we can pin down the self. So the whole concept of self becomes challenged, right? And that's part of what we got to understand. In our view of ourselves, how much of that is formed by instincts and by emotions, by rational thought and by reflective thought? So it's a great question because it's a classic area where you'd say, well, hold on a minute. Let's not accept the premise of that question. Let's just start again and look at what is really going on now in terms of the science. Now, what can happen, sometimes we can be in a good place with our identity and we're in flow, okay? And basically, we'll feel authentic, et cetera, et cetera. But for most people at different points, there's a struggle between the identity that we've created for ourselves, who we've told ourselves we are, and our actual feelings. Yeah, we have a need, if you like, a psychological need to make sense of our life and to create stories. And we tell ourselves a story. When we look back on memories, we fill in the gaps from the way we feel now. Okay, so what that means is we have to get underneath that stuff. So many people will experience what they're trying to hold on to in their conscious brain as they view themselves and what's actually going on in their body. Because you can't fool the heart. Now, this isn't some like loose self-help comment. What it means is no matter what we're telling ourselves up here as to how we feel, the heart has to deal with the feelings. It has to deal with the hormones that are circulating in the bloodstream, right? So there's an honesty in our bodies that we need to tune into. And when we feel stressed, you know, the evidence of this is there's so much stress everywhere because so many people have been encouraged, stroke coerced into trying to be something they are not. So we play mental games, but the powerhouse is not what's going on up here, it's what's going on down here. You see, we feed information around, you know, from our gut, from our heart, into the brain. And there's far more instructions that go from the body into the brain than the other way around. All right, that, again, something we didn't understand in the last century. So now there's a whole process of just thinking again and saying, okay, so if I've got a view of myself, where did that come from? You know, did other people tell me that? Is it something that I've created myself, but actually I can't back it up with my own feelings? Or am I in a really good place? And it'll probably be a mixture of all those things. So I'm sorry, Luke, it's not like a direct answer to what you're saying, but it's a great illustration of what's involved here. There's so much opening up of thinking that we need to do to take advantage of the new information that's now available to us.
That's great, thank you. Fair comment. There's plenty of thinking to do.
Yeah, I know, a lot there, wasn't
Lots
there,
to digest, yep.
Sorry, yeah.
Mostly everything you say, Clive.
Everyone be afraid to ask a question, though.
Yeah, I'm very much a reflective brain type. So everything you say, I have to take a step back and just think about it for a minute. What is that question that we've brought it up in some of our workshops in the happiness index, but there was a question that you asked us one time that definitely I took some time to reflect on it, but it was something about, is the story you're telling yourself more important than the truth? Is that the question?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
You know, and it is because you know I've worked as a coach for 15 years or so, and I see this. I see people get themselves tangled up because, you know, they're almost trying to tell themselves how they should feel. It's the other way around. You know, it starts with the feeling, and the thoughts come later. Yeah, that's the whole point in this. You know, I gave you some figures, but our thoughts register in 250 milliseconds. Now that sounds a little bit, you sort of think, hold on a minute. If you were really listening, you heard me say it goes into consciousness at 420 milliseconds. So do we have thoughts that don't go into consciousness? Yes, we do. Because a lot of our thinking goes on at a level that doesn't come into our awareness. It's to do with execution, okay? Things that we just do, we call them reflex actions and things like that. So again, it's a level that needs to be understood. But back to your point, Rose, yeah, it's very much about, yeah, just the classic is the number of people I've come across who went on a particular career because they felt they had to. Okay, this is a very tangible example of that. Because they were told by the people that influenced them through their lives, their parents, their peers, whoever it might be, that you had to be one of these to be valued and be successful. Well, I would say as much as 50% of the people I've come across actually say, I made the wrong decision. You know, I'm now in a place where I'm not, you know, okay, it pays the bills, it's okay. But in general, I've got all this other stuff going on that I can't express. So it's these, so I think the type of examples where our story gets us into a mess. And actually, you can free yourself from your story. You know, see, we need our story to make sense of what's going on in the past, but it doesn't have to make too much sense of what goes on in the future. It's more a case of giving ourselves a freedom to be what our whole intelligence system tells us we want to be, where our talent is, where our passion is. And that's very different to simply playing to somebody else's agenda that's based in our memory. Okay? So I hope that sort of gets it across a little bit.
Definitely.
You know, we talk in the program, we had a session about the felt self, it's called. And that's why do we need this story? So we look at that first, and it's to do with, we have to have a sense of continuity, a sense of embodiment. We look at all the features of that. Why is it the case? And once again, you know, we've got to, there've been far too many approaches, I think, in management and in L&D, which they're too rational, they're too simplistic. So how often do you go on some sort of program or course where you end up with a set of rules that you should follow to fix your life? Okay, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't stick. Now, I'm not saying there's no value in it. If you're looking for techniques and you've already got the passion, then great, that's very, very useful. But there is no change without emotional change. And there's no emotional change without seeing the world differently. So we have to step back into that process and seeing the world differently. That's part of the instincts bit, you know, because literally we see things differently. You know, we don't understand that. We think we see all the same things, but we don't. The subtle differences in what we physically see can have a massive impact on things like our beliefs and the way that we interpret the world. So this is all about that stuff. And to me, you know, I would absolutely love it if the HR function stepped up to the plate on this, because, you know, it requires a real investment in understanding people and understanding the connection between people that, frankly, other parts of the business will not take on. But this is the real value add stuff. When you look at organizations of the future that I'm sure will happen, these more free-flowing organizations, you know, any function that can add value to that ability to make the most of the talent in the organization will be hugely important. You know, and then there, I think HR itself faces a fundamental repositioning. You know, unfortunately, partly its own fault, and of course I'm generalizing, and partly the circumstances it faced. It's far too often seen as being there to protect the organization that people work for. Whereas the reality is it should be there to support the people that create that organization to get the best out of them. And, you know, obviously my background is, as I said, originally HR, and a lot of my clients are in HR. So I don't think I'm talking, you know, without any backing for this. There's a massive challenge there, but also a huge opportunity to create a new HR type model.
Yeah.
You don't know what to say there, do you?
Honestly,
it's such a big
honestly,
statement. It's like, where the hell do I start with this? I get that. I get
but could you imagine if organizations were just giving HR the opportunity to be trained on neuroscience and how that would revolutionize workplaces?
Yeah, and I'm not just pushing the neuroscience. I mean, yeah, you know, it's where I come from, but I really hope that people will intuitively connect with this. You know, I mean, like what's great is when we have conversations with some big organizations, and it's not just the big ones, but they can influence a lot of people. So like the response we've had in somewhere like Sodexo, like which is a huge organization, and what, 450,000 people or something like that across the world. So, and I've been talking directly to some of their senior HR players in the change programs that they're talking about. And their response is fantastic. You know, they're not hung up on hierarchy. They are very pragmatic and practical about, you know, we're going to have to change this at a pace that makes sense to us. And we really want to understand, you know, why you say the things you do and what would we do to put them into practice. But you can't be afraid. You can't hold on to the past, you know. And it's fantastic that there are people that are really opening their minds up to this stuff, because it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Incredibly exciting. But if you just hold in on the stuff that came, look, psychology flourished in the last century, right? There aren't any breakthroughs in psychology now. And I'm not knocking it. I studied it, right? It's all about refinement of practice, which is brilliant. And we still need that, yeah? But it doesn't take us to the next level. Not in the organizational world. So in the organizational world, you're saying, okay, so how do we keep the good stuff, psychology stuff in place, but then come in with this other stuff that will kick it on another huge level.
Mm-hmm.
So is everyone afraid to ask me a question now? Taking on the Welsh Baptist.
Maybe everybody else is reflective like me, just thinking.
Joe, come on. You've had some experience in the happiness index. You're not going to get away with this, mate. Can you? What's it been like for you, the experience? And you know, you can be honest with me. I have no problem with people saying I'm confused.
Well, yeah, there's definitely been times I've been a bit confused.
Yep.
But with each week, we've been doing it. What is it now? Like 6 months properly, maybe.
Yep.
It starts to sort of get embedded more. And now we've moved. So there's a lot of, there's quite a bit of theory to do, but now we're putting it into practice, which is where it's becoming, it sort of embeds and sustains a lot more. We're doing a lot of like 3-way reviewing of each other, where you have to critique each other and stuff. And we're starting to understand our brain types, like emotional, reflective, and starting to understand how to communicate better, and also starting to think about how we can use that in like a sales way. So like, so we're getting much more mature with it. I'd say we're still in our infancy, but it's definitely making more sense. And it's genuinely just quite, it's really, really interesting. And I think we're in a good position because we're a small company where everyone knows each other's name, which makes it much easier because we actually know each other fairly well. But it's been a really interesting process. And I suppose the question would be, how long, I don't know if it depends on like company size, until from beginning to end, until it's sort of self-governing? Like,
yeah, no, it's a great question. So, let's pick up the point about scale, first of all, because you said, yeah, and you're right, there's a proof of concept part about this because you're a small business. But I've managed scale, and I know this is doable on a scale level. But what's vital, and that's the reason I work with a happiness index, is you have to have data then, because basically the reason why the small scale works is, as you said, Joe, is because you know each other, right? So you've got that context, yeah? When you don't know each other in bigger organizations, you need data that keeps your finger on the pulse. And that's obviously where the happiness index stuff comes in. So you can regularly tune in to how people are feeling, in essence, okay? So anyone that works with our data knows that it's much more biased towards emotions rather than the usual rational tick box stuff that's out there, okay? Because we really want to know how people feel. So for instance, it's more important if people are upset, we want to know they're upset and should be more worried about the fact they're upset than getting a good score on the analysis, right? Because the good score is just papering over the cracks. What is important is to understand the emotional state of people in the business. And the sort of stuff that we'll do, you can map that then against change curves. Look, if you just had a major restructuring program through a business and like a third of the people, are under some sort of threat, are you still looking for the same like morale score? Are you still trying to fool yourselves that there's some linear process going on in organization and, everything's supposed to look hunky-dory? No, what you want to know is, which part of the organization are upset? What exactly are they upset about? Is it the way they've been handled, et cetera, et cetera? Because when you have that information, you can do something about it. Okay, so absolutely it reflects size. So the point I was trying to make there is that you can, typically as a bigger organization, you'd start with pilots. You start with creating experiences in different parts of the business that you then connect over time, which allows you then to build a solid base from which you can understand the template that you need to create for the total organization. And I will never go into a business and say, you've got to do this, this, and this. I will say, these are the principles. Now work with me to help me understand, how those relate to your business, because you're the guys that understand your business. And it becomes a co-creation process. I would never tell any organization this is the way to do it, right? But I'm there to keep the principles in place, exactly as I did with Happiness Index. The most important thing I said to them was, these are the principles, now go and run with it. Go and make it your own. And keep coming back to me, not for authority, but just come and checking back in with me to make sure you stay in broadly on the right track. Because I've got a better feel for how things are likely to go in the future. So let's use our pooled intelligence, right? So it's that type of process. And I don't think there's a time frame as to when you're fully on board, because the journey will never end. But I think, just like you're reflecting yourselves, there's the early stage where it feels very strange. Very quickly, when you're going to get the connection with other people going, it feels very real. And people start to be able to understand what it's about. And up until that point, it was all a bit theoretical. And then things start happening because of this cultural accelerator thing. We bounce off each other, and fundamentally things change at a hell of a pace. And leadership is there then to orchestrate that process in a way that maintains authenticity. That's orchestrate, not manipulate the process, right? But it's there to sort of keep the whole together, to keep all the causes aligned that we're trying to create in a business and, social sense, so that the business can motor as a whole. So no black and white answers in this world, just processes, just experiences. Yeah, experience is a better word. The process will often you'll hear that rationally, and it's not a typical business process. It's an ongoing experience. That's what we're talking about here.
Clive, I'd like to go back to one of the things that you said about, getting feedback and I guess making change based on what the feedback is. But what if there's things that come out of collecting feedback that you can't really do anything about, like, the weather or COVID-19, or, what do you do with that information, and why is it important to even ask?
Well, I mean, if somebody's expecting you to do something about COVID, then you'd question, the way that the feedback session has been set up, right? So at one level, of course, that wouldn't make any sense. But what we can do is reflect on the environment that we work in. And that's the important thing. So again, from neuroscience, we'll understand that our brains are reacting every second of the day to what our experience, to what our environment is, to what's going on around us, right? And all of that is going on subconsciously. Subconsciously, we process data at 1 million times the speed of what we process consciously, right? So another reason for getting to understand the unconscious world much more, because it holds a lot of keys that we don't understand. So it's more about that sort of process of understanding how for instance, our work environment impacts us. Now, that is a good discussion, right? And in the surveys that we're creating now within the Happiness Index, there's a lot of questions about environment. We need to know, do people feel free to express themselves in the environment, or do they feel oppressed in some way? Is it physically a different environment? Is there, are there hints of bullying or, of prejudice in their environments? When we understand that stuff, we're immediately in a place to start doing something about it. So environmental impact is absolutely crucial as part of the discussion, because we're all responding to that environment. Nothing is more important in that environment than the people we work with. They're the ones that influence us all of the time, whether we like it or not, whether it's just pressing our buttons and frustrating us, they continue to shape us. So that's why we have to learn together, and why feedback is so powerful. Most people struggle with handling it, because we've built organizations that use things like appraisals to judge people rather than support them. And we have to change that, where, the brain can't work without the biofeedback it gets from the body, okay? And us not getting feedback is like saying, okay, we're going to carry on with our own illusions. We need feedback. So it's hugely incumbent on leadership then to create climates and environments where feedback is the norm, and develop our people to a way where they can both deliver it and handle it, because they trust each other. Now, if somebody says something where the words are not perhaps well chosen to any one of you, and you don't know that person, you'll be hurt by it, and you'll take offense. But if you know that person, and she has offered you a comment that is perhaps not perfect in the wording, you'll trust the relationship, and you'll allow them to get away with it, okay? So it's sort of just really understanding that, we've got so much to offer each other. We've got to get these organizational barriers out of the way. And there is no, I know some traditional CEOs would sort of think, oh, that sounds like chaos. It's not, because people want to perform. We're designed to perform, but we need to be given a lot more ability and opportunity to design how that's going to work for ourselves. So one of the principles we talk about in the quantum world is being self-organizing. And that means over a sensible period of time, what you want is people who are committed to a cause, and they want to give everything to it. And then you have to give them the opportunity to work out how they should be organized to let that happen. Trust them. Let's try it. We've built so many organizations that are that are built on distrust, let's give the other one a go, because it'll actually get us a lot further.
And that part that you said about, giving feedback that brings me back to one of our sessions that we did, Clive, and I think Joe mentioned it too, with doing the appreciations and suggestions.
Yeah.
And I've just found that so useful, and the way that it's even worded, just appreciation and a suggestion is such a good way to give feedback.
Yeah.
I know that's helped me immensely, and even understanding me being a reflective person and maybe Joe being a more emotional brain type is just helping me to understand how I should share my feedback and how to even go about having a conversation. Yeah.
Maybe as a last piece, Rosie, it would just be worth a couple of minutes, because we made a couple of references, like you used the word, their brain types.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So one of the typical entry points for people to understand with what we do with the neuroscience is, there are 4 distinct let's call them behavioral systems in the brain. Okay, where we can recognize them in terms of the part of the brain that's activated. And that's instincts, emotions, rational thought, and reflective thought. Okay. So one of the things we do in getting people involved in this at the outset, so that they get more familiar with the science and they can make it relatable day to day, is we get people to raise their awareness of how these different brain types work. Right? Now, this isn't the case of just putting people in boxes. That's the last thing I want, right? Because we can move between these styles within milliseconds, right? But the point is, if I keep it sort of simplistic for the moment, you can recognize that certain people are going to be reflectively driven. They like time to sit back and process ideas, and they like space, or rationally driven. They like detail, they like processing data, they like evidence, right? Emotionally driven, which is all about relationships and connection, but equally is a very creative style. Or instinctively driven, which is all about results. We talk about crocodiles being a representation of the instinctive style, because the world is very straightforward at that level. It's like, can I eat it? Can I have sex with it? Or can I go to sleep? So we try to relate these things back to basic instincts that go on down at a fundamental and deep level within us. And then what we can do is get people to recognize how their own style, which they've developed through life, is manifesting, how they're putting it out there. Okay. And the more that people understand each other's styles, the more understanding and respect comes with it. You imagine if you're a emotionally driven style, and I don't like the connotations around emotions, because emotions are intelligence, like everything else in the body, right? They're just a form of body and intelligence data. But if you're a more emotionally driven style, and you're in a meeting and some sort of idea comes up and you're excited about it, and you turn to the person next to you and you're full of enthusiasm and you say, well, what about this? What do you think? And you're dealing with a person with a rational style, you'll get an immediate clash. Because the person with the rational style will think, oh, God, you're in my face. I need a bit of time to process this. Let me think about it and I'll come back to you. But because the emotional style wants a response there and then, it thinks, oh, God, that's no good. I'll turn to somebody else who is going to give me an emotional response. No, there's no bad intentions in that. There's no, people are not planning to not communicate in that scenario. But that's what happens when we don't understand our different needs. And we need all of these. Well, we've all got these in us. It's just how we deploy them. And every team needs the appropriate mix of emotional, instinctive, rational, and reflective intelligence. So we get people to work with that stuff. And it's a very, very tangible way of sort of saying, okay, right, I'm starting to get this science because I feel this every day. I can see it happening every day. And that's when the light bulbs start going on with people. Okay. Now we're starting to get a tangible understanding of what this neuroscience stuff is about, and we can use it.
I know we have only 3 minutes left.
Okay.
So if anybody has any final questions, now is your time to ask. Otherwise, I might end the session on that.
Well, I would love any feedback, guys. Even if you think I've gone off my rocker, that's okay. You won't be the first to say that.
All right, guys, I'm going to end the session then. But if anybody wants to get in touch with you, Clive, how can they reach out? LinkedIn, email?
Yeah, but LinkedIn, or, happy. I don't know if they can see my email address or whatever, that's fine. You know, I'm happy for people to communicate with me. Yeah.
And if anybody wants to learn more about how the happiness index integrate neuroscience and all this quantum stuff into our platforms and what we do, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm happy to talk you through it. But thank you, Clive. It was such an interesting session, and I'm going to go reflect over my lunch.
Yes, let's do that. But don't let it affect your digestion.
After this.
Yeah. Okay, nice
Thanks,
to meet
Clive.
you guys.
All right.
Yeah, all the best.
Thanks for coming.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.